let's be honest. If you played board games before, especially if you've read the back of the box or maybe the first page of the rule book where it gives you the setting, you've been burned before by games that promise this beautiful theme. It says you're a group of ancient warriors who the evil wizards have risen up against you, and you have to go to battle against them and unlock mysterious secrets, and you'll find, and they'll say all this stuff you'll do. Then you'll play the game, and the game will be, yeah, go to the green spot and get the green stuff, and then you'll take it back and you'll trade it in for the gold stuff, and that will give you the blue stuff, which will help you fight them when you roll the red stuff. Now, I'm certainly someone who can play a game with no theme, basically no story, and just have fun doing the game for the game's sake. But it is kind of nice when a game offers you story, offers you theme, offers you adventure, and then it delivers on that promise. And that is what Above and Below does. So in Above and Below, you start with 3 villagers, and you're attempting to build your city, your village up by doing things like acquiring new villagers or building buildings. And buildings can have more beds, so you can have more villagers in your city because now there's more houses they can sleep in. They could have endgame score, or they also could produce some precious resources. So those resources increase your income from turn to turn, but they also have a really interesting way of giving you endgame score. So for example, if you put 4 fish into the first spot, those are each worth 1 victory point. But if you can get a few other resources down before you place your first fish, basically delay placing the fish for a little bit, you could have each fish be worth 4 victory points. So if you have a lot of buildings that can help you acquire fish, you might want to try to get the fish a little further down the line. So the way you're going to be doing all these things is each turn you're going to be grabbing a villager and taking an action like harvesting, or some villagers have a hammer which allowed you to build a building, or some villagers have a quill which allowed you to recruit new villagers. So far all I've done is describe a pretty typical board game, right? You have people that take actions, you're trying to get money, use that money to maybe get more resources, give you more money, and also some endgame scores, some buildings to give you endgame score. All that stuff is pretty typical, but then what it makes Above and Below so cool is there's an entire element of the game called adventuring. So when you adventure, you're going to take 2 or more of your villagers and go down below. Above, well, now you're going down below into the earth and search for caverns, places to build new buildings, but also really cool story and other perks in the game. Now this is what really sets apart Above and Below. You're going to roll dice and be assigned a story based on your results. And these are little paragraphs you read off that are all really unique and for the most part really entertaining. Like you might say, I'm going to hit this adventure action and say, cool, you come across this old man. Do you choose to help the old man find whatever his lost staff, or do you want to just try to find it for yourself and steal it from the old man? And you're like, okay, so then the person who reads you the story, one of the other players reads the story for you, and they tell you, okay, so if you choose to try to help him find his staff, you need to roll a 3 to achieve that. If you try to find it for yourself, maybe you have to roll 5 to achieve that. When you're going to take the villagers you have, see what their odds are. Everyone has different adventuring strengths, so some players like on a 1, they get 1 success, but if they roll 4, 5, or 6, they get 2 successes. Basically, see what you have in front of you, who you took on that adventure, and see how high of a result you can get. Now, the higher you get, the more rewards you're going to get. So maybe you do the lowest level result, and cool, you get this card which will let you place an underground building on. So you've been building above ground buildings. This card will let you put an underground, gets a cavern down there, you can build a building. You get that card, and you also get 1 coin. But then maybe you go for a really difficult result. You took 4 villagers on an adventure, you had to get a 7 and you got it, and now you're going to get the card. Maybe you get 5 coins and you also get an emerald or something like that. Now this can really add up. If you go on some adventures and you get some resources, like I said earlier, the resource track has a lot to do with endgame score, especially if you can put those rare resources down the lower value spots, because then the resources you can harvest from your village over and over again are going to go into the higher level spots. So if you go on a few adventures, you can fill in a few spots that I got paper here, and I got amethyst right here, and I got some ore right here. Well, now I can put a whole bunch of things like fish and mushrooms and food, the simple resources, up higher and really up your endgame score. But all that aside, that's not even the fun part. The fun part is reading off the stories. Like every single game I've played of this, someone goes on an adventure, the other player reads them a story. In most games like this, when people are rolling dice, everyone's rooting against them, right? Everyone's like, oh, I hope you fail, hope you mess this up. Every game I've played of this, the other players, they can sit there and they can see the rewards. They can see if they get the 7, it's going to really help them. But still, you're just like, come on, because you want to read this next paragraph. Some of them say, if you succeed, flip to this paragraph, kind of like a choose your own adventure book. You're going to flip to this paragraph and read this one off. And the stories are so fun. Everyone wants everyone to kind of go for it and see the stories and go on adventures. And that's what makes this game so unique to me. Every game I've played is, again, players are almost cheering for each other or laughing or telling these great great kind of stories. Like, oh, this was hilarious. Remember when you like found this person and you did this? And I don't want to spoil the stories because the whole great part of the game is the stories, but it's so fun to kind of like have a game that it is kind of based in solid mechanisms of trying to like get your city to churn out some resources and get victory points. But then the actual adventuring part isn't just a spot that says get reward, but actually is fun, interesting stories you get to read off. So all that together really makes it one of the best board gaming experiences I've had this year. So when I played Above and Below the first time, it was just such a great experience. I literally got done, and Joel, who I've done some playthroughs on his channels with, the first thing he said was like, that was amazing. Like, it's just so shocking like how well balanced the story elements are with the board gamery elements where you're trying to again get your city, get your resources, but also you really want to go on those adventures, and sometimes you get your people injured. You let your people get injured just to push to the next level of the adventure. Like, all that stuff is so interesting. It just makes it one of the most satisfying board gaming experiences I've had this entire year. Now, I do have a couple negatives I just want to throw about the game. I don't want you just to all run out and buy it right away and just think that Ryan says it's the best board game ever, we all have to buy it. I will let you just say a couple things just to kind of caution you. And one is, with any game with this story kind of element, they unfortunately at some point will run out of steam. So depending on what kind of a gamer you are, just be aware of that, right? If you are someone who wants to play a game 3, 5, 10 times, you might repeat a story paragraph a couple times. What happens is you flip over a card and you roll a die to see which one you read off. And there's something like 150, I think, 200 different things you can get. So you're not going to have a whole bunch of repeating for a while, but there will be a point if you go on a few adventures every game that they'll start repeating. So again, know yourself as a gamer. If you're someone that wants to have a game and you're getting this for the story, but you also want to play it 40 or 50 times, it's going to kind of run its course eventually. That's kind of the nature of these story-based games. I mean, I played this game several times, and I even had a couple times that you roll a number and you start reading a paragraph and you're like, oh yeah, I read this one. This is the one where this happens. They're not long stories. Each paragraph it's a paragraph or two that you read off. But again, just know that it's not going to necessarily, for me, probably become a staple like something like Viticulture, which I can play Viticulture again and have almost as much joy as the first time I played it, because every game is so interesting, who you're playing it against. Games like this, again, eventually you will go through the story, and then that will kind of dry up eventually. So like I said, that's kind of a given. With any story-based game, eventually the well will run dry and you'll run out of new content to read. As far as actually mechanism of the game, I really only had one issue with it. The 3 villagers everyone starts with are all the same, but the villagers you can acquire all have vastly different strengths. Some villagers are over twice as good as other villagers, but they don't have a cost on them. The way you price them is basically a scale of there's 5 spots, and this first spot costs 2, the next 2 cost 3, then a 4 and a 5. And as you buy villagers, the old villagers out there slide into their spots. I have no problems with this. Lots of games do this. It's a great idea. The villagers that aren't wanted tend to stay out there and get cheaper, and the ones that are wanted, people kind of jump in and buy them when they're at the higher prices. That works great. The only issue I've really had with the game is that the first player of the very first round, if one of those really good villagers is out there in the 2 or 3 coin spot especially, it is a massive advantage from the start the game out. And I had a game where only 2 coins, the cheapest possible spot, they would require the best villager in the game. So they automatically, all their adventuring were almost like automatic successes. Again, they can use this one villager and they get as much power as me possibly saying 2 or 3 villagers on adventure. So they send 2 villagers on an adventure and I had to kind of do 4 or 5. It made the whole game very imbalanced. They very easily hit the top level of all their adventures, and I just couldn't. I couldn't get to that level because I didn't have the villagers with that kind of strength. So in later rounds, it doesn't matter. The first player rotates, but it doesn't matter as much because in later rounds, if there's any really, really good villagers at the 5 spot, people have the opportunity to spend 5 for it, or maybe at the 4 spot. People can just jump in there and say, I don't want to give you a cheap villager. I'm going to buy this now before it slides down to the cheaper level. It's just that very first round. If you flip over a really good villager in one of those first 3 spots, it gives a huge first player advantage to the first person because they can get that villager. Then not only that, they acquired the cheap villagers. So now you're paying, if you want any villagers at all, which you probably do, you're paying even more for your first villager, and it's not near as good as their first villager. Now, there will clearly be lots of games of this where that's not going to be a factor, right? Where there won't be a big villager the first round, so they will only slide into more expensive spots first, which is where they should be. People will probably acquire them before they get cheap, but it's something worth mentioning because I noticed it did have a pretty big effect at the end score. Now, that being said, I really didn't care at all while playing the game because it actually made my opponent go on a lot more adventures since they had an advantage in that area, and it was more fun because we got to read more adventures, which is the whole point of playing the game. But if you really got in there and really wanted to care about winning and losing, it ended up being pretty disproportional. And actually, I played this game many times now, and the first player has won a lot, especially when that's happened to good villagers come out first. But even with that, I feel like Above and Below was just an amazing experience. I did such a good job of balancing both camps so well. You could have a game that was story, story, story. All that mattered was the story, but you really don't have any mechanism to hold the game together. You're just kind of reading off story. Or like many games, you have so many great mechanisms, but really none of that story to kind of tie it in. I think Above and Below, if you're up for a game that there's story, it actually matters what the story is. The stories are interesting and kind of draw you in. I think you could really, really like this game. All right, I'm going to stop there because I could literally go on and on all the things I loved about Above and Below because it was one of my favorite games I've played recently, but hopefully that's enough to give you a clear picture of how it works. Of course, if you have questions about anything I said or some more details, feel free to ask in the comments down below, or if you played Above and Below and kind of want to give your opinion on it, that's cool as well. We can chat about that. Of course, if you want to like the video, if you enjoyed it, that'd be great. Subscribe to the channel, see more things like this where I talk about board games that I love, but also lots of playthroughs, solo playthroughs, and some group ones. See ya.